we are never truly alone in our inner lives. Every interaction we have, every conversation, every shared silence, every moment of eye contact with another human being is also an energetic exchange. Something passes between people that cannot be fully measured, fully named, or fully explained by the language of conventional psychology. And yet, anyone who has paid careful attention to their own experience knows that this exchange is real. You have felt it. You leave certain conversations feeling lighter than when you arrived, more alive, more expansive, more connected to something good in yourself and in the world. And you leave other conversations feeling hollowed out, depleted, as though something has been taken from you that you cannot quite identify or account for. This invisible dimension of human relationship was one of the central preoccupations of Carl Jung, perhaps the most penetrating explorer of the human psyche that the 20th century produced. Jung spent decades mapping the hidden architectures of the inner world, the unconscious, the shadow, the archetypes, the collective depths that lie beneath the surface of individual awareness. And in doing so, he gave us something extraordinarily practical, a framework for understanding not just ourselves, but the often bewildering and sometimes painful dynamics that arise between people. Today, we are going to use that framework to explore something that most of us encounter, but few of us are taught to navigate clearly: the experience of being around people who diminish us, drain us, manipulate us, or pull us away from our own center. We will look at 5 dimensions of this experience, 5 ways in which the people around us can affect our energy, our perception, and our sense of self, and we will draw on Jung's philosophy to understand what is actually happening and, more importantly, what we can do about it. This is not about becoming suspicious of everyone around you. It is not about building walls or retreating into isolation. It is about developing the kind of discernment, the kind of clear, compassionate, unsentimental seeing that allows you to be genuinely present in your relationships without losing yourself in them. Let us begin. 1. The power of intuition and the body's alarm signals. There is a moment that almost everyone has experienced, though relatively few people honor it as fully as they should. You meet someone at a party, in a professional context, through a mutual friend, and on the surface, everything seems perfectly fine. They say the right things. They present themselves well. Your rational mind finds no particular fault with them. And yet, somewhere beneath the level of conscious analysis, something stirs. A tightness in the chest, a subtle contraction in the stomach, a vague but persistent sense that something here is not quite right. This is intuition, and according to Jung, it is not a mystical or irrational faculty. It is one of the 4 primary psychological functions. Alongside thinking, feeling, and sensation, intuition, in the Jungian framework, is the psyche's capacity to perceive information that the conscious mind has not yet had time to process and organize. It is the rapid, pre-verbal synthesis of subtle shifts in vocal tone, minute inconsistencies between what someone says and how their body moves when they say it, all of the countless signals that pass between people far faster than conscious thought can track. When your body responds to another person with that nameless unease, it is not malfunctioning. It is not being irrational or unfair. It is doing precisely what it evolved to do, synthesizing a vast amount of subtle information into a single, urgent signal. Your nervous system, which is far older and in many ways far wiser than your conscious mind, is saying, "Pay attention here. Something in this situation requires your awareness." That the tragedy is how consistently we override this signal. We have been taught by culture, by education, by the perfectly understandable desire to be liked and to seem reasonable, to discount our gut responses in the absence of what we call real evidence. We tell ourselves, "I'm being unfair. I don't have any concrete reason to feel this way. I should give them the benefit of the doubt." And so we ignore the signal. We suppress the discomfort. We proceed as though everything is fine. And then, often much later, we find ourselves thinking, "I knew. From the very beginning I knew. Why didn't I listen?" Jung was direct about this. He believed that the body carries a form of intelligence that the ego, in its arrogance, consistently underestimates. The tightness in your chest when someone speaks to you, the heaviness that settles over you after certain interactions, the way your breathing changes in certain people's presence. These are not random physiological events. They are communications from the deeper layers of your own psyche about what is happening in the space between you and another person. Energy, as Jung understood it, does not lie. The rational mind can be deceived. The desire to believe the best of people can be manipulated, but the body, when you learn to listen to it, is one of the most reliable guides available to you. The practice, then, is simple in concept, though demanding in execution. Begin to take your bodily responses seriously. Not as absolute verdicts. Intuition can be refined, and it can sometimes reflect our own projections rather than genuine signals from outside, but as important data, as the beginning of inquiry rather than the end of it. When you feel that inexplicable discomfort in someone's presence, don't dismiss it. Sit with it, let it inform your attention, and watch, over time, whether the evidence of your direct experience confirms or contradicts what your body was trying to tell you. In most cases, you will find that it was telling you the truth. 2. Energy vampires, emotional burden, and the manipulation of guilt. There is a particular kind of person whose company leaves you feeling as though you have run a marathon you never agreed to enter. These are the individuals whose conversations are structured, reliably, and without exception, around their own suffering, their problems, their grievances, their dramas, the world as a place that has consistently wronged them, misunderstood them, failed to give them what they deserve. Jung would have recognized immediately what is happening in these interactions. He understood that the psyche, when it has not done the work of taking responsibility for its own inner life, develops sophisticated strategies for outsourcing that responsibility to others. The person who perpetually presents you with their suffering, who calls at midnight, who monopolizes every conversation with their latest crisis, who describes their pain in elaborate and repetitive detail but shows no genuine interest in resolution, is not simply venting. They are, whether consciously or not, using you as what we might call an emotional repository, a place to deposit the weight they are unwilling to carry themselves. This would be challenging enough on its own, but what makes these dynamics particularly draining and particularly difficult to exit is the second layer, the manipulation of guilt. When you begin to recognize what is happening and attempt to create some distance, to establish limits around your availability, to redirect the conversation, or simply to say, "I'm not able to talk right now," the response is rarely gracious. Instead, you are made to feel that your boundary is a betrayal, that your need for your own time and energy is selfishness, that a truly good friend, a truly caring person, would always be available, would never put limits on their compassion, would understand that the other person's need is so exceptional that normal considerations don't apply. This is manipulation. It may not always be conscious manipulation sometimes. These patterns are deeply rooted and entirely unexamined, but it is manipulation nonetheless. And Jung's framework helps us understand exactly why it works as effectively as it does. Most of us carry within us what Jung called the persona, the social mask, the identity we have constructed in response to the expectations of others. And woven into that persona, for many people, is a deep identification with being helpful, being caring, being the person that others can rely on. When someone tells us directly or implicitly that withdrawing our availability makes us bad, selfish, uncaring, they are not simply criticizing a behavior, they are attacking our sense of who we are. The way through this is not to stop caring, it is to understand the difference between genuine care, which sometimes includes the courage to say no, to refuse to enable patterns that harm both parties, and the compulsive need to be needed, which is simply another form of self-abandonment, dressed in the language of generosity. Your energy is not infinite. Your emotional availability is not a resource that can be endlessly extracted without cost. Protecting it is not selfishness. It is the most basic form of self-respect, and paradoxically, it is only from a position of genuine self-respect that you can offer anything of real value to anyone else. 3. Shadow projection and gaslighting. Of all Jung's contributions to our understanding of human psychology, the concept of the shadow is perhaps the most practically important for navigating difficult relationships. The shadow, in Jungian terms, is the repository of everything we have been unable to accept about ourselves, the impulses, qualities, and desires that conflict with our conscious self-image, and that we have therefore pushed into the unconscious, where they continued to exert their influence invisibly. Here is the crucial point. What we cannot face in ourselves, we tend to perceive in others. The person who is deeply uncomfortable with their own anger will notice and respond intensely to anger in others, often in situations where others barely register it. The person who cannot acknowledge their own envy will be unusually sensitive to what they perceive as the envy of those around them. The person who carries unprocessed shame about their own dishonesty may become preoccupied with the perceived dishonesty of others. Jung called this mechanism projection, the unconscious attribution to others of qualities that actually belong to oneself. And in relationships with people who have done little or no inner work, projection can become a central and deeply damaging dynamic. In its most benign form, this simply means that someone responds to you through the distorting lens of their own unprocessed material. They see in you a reflection of something in themselves that they cannot bear to look at directly. This is uncomfortable, and it can be confusing, but it is, in principle, navigable. In its most dangerous form, however, this dynamic becomes what is now widely recognized as gaslighting, a systematic pattern of behavior in which one person works, whether deliberately or unconsciously, to undermine another person's trust in their own perception of reality. Gaslighting takes many forms. The denial of events that clearly occurred. I never said that. You're imagining things. The invalidation of emotional responses. You're being completely irrational. No reasonable person would feel that way. The rewriting of shared history. That's not what happened. You always twist things. The subtle, persistent suggestion that your mind cannot be trusted, that your memory is unreliable, your perceptions distorted, your emotional responses disproportionate. The goal of this pattern, whether its perpetrator is aware of it or not, is control. If you can be made to doubt your own perception of reality, if you can be brought to the point where you check every response, every memory, every feeling against the other person's account before trusting it, then you have effectively outsourced your inner authority to them. They become the arbiter of what is real, what happened, what you are permitted to feel about it. Jung's antidote to this is the development of what he called psychological consciousness, the capacity to observe one's own inner experience with clarity and trust, to distinguish between genuine reflection and externally imposed distortion. The practice of keeping a journal, of tracking your own responses and observations over time, can be invaluable here. The written record of your own experience becomes a touchstone, a way of maintaining contact with your own reality, in the face of attempts to dissolve it. When someone consistently tells you that what you remember didn't happen, that what you feel makes no sense, that your perception of events is systematically wrong, trust the accumulating weight of your own documented experience over the insistence of any single voice, however confident or authoritative it may seem. For hidden envy those who are disturbed by your light. Jung understood that the human psyche is not motivated only by the drives that Freud emphasized, sex and aggression, but by something deeper and more complex, the drive toward wholeness, toward the fullest possible expression of one's own nature. And he understood, with equal clarity, that this drive can be profoundly threatening to those who have abandoned it in themselves. There is a particular kind of person who is drawn to those they secretly envy. They position themselves as friends, as supporters, as members of your inner circle, and for periods of time, they may genuinely play these roles. But there is a tell. Whenever you begin to expand, whenever you step more fully into your gifts, achieve something significant, receive recognition, or simply seem to be moving toward a more alive and authentic version of yourself, something shifts in them. It may be subtle at first, a slight cooling of enthusiasm when you share good news, a qualifying remark where you might have expected simple celebration, a helpful warning that arrives at precisely the moment when your confidence is growing. Just be careful. I wouldn't want you to get your hopes up. Are you sure you're ready for something that big? I've noticed that people sometimes react negatively when these remarks arrive wrapped in the language of concern. They are delivered with an expression of care, but their effect, and often their function, is to introduce doubt exactly where clarity was beginning to emerge. In more overt cases, this pattern becomes direct sabotage, speaking negatively about you to others at the very moment your reputation is growing, taking credit for contributions you made, or creating conflict that distracts you from your forward momentum. Jung's insight into this pattern is both compassionate and unflinching. He understood that people who cannot tolerate another's light are, at the deepest level, in pain. They are people who have, for whatever reason, fear, early wounding, the accumulated weight of self-betrayal, given up on their own fullest becoming, and the sight of someone else refusing to give up on theirs is, for such a person, an unbearable confrontation with the life they are not living. This understanding calls for compassion, but compassion does not require that you make yourself smaller to protect someone else's comfort. It does not require that you dim your light so that those who have abandoned their own feel less alone in their darkness. that is not kindness. That is, as Jung would say, a profound disservice to yourself and, ultimately, to them. The appropriate response to those who are disturbed by your growth is not anger, and it is not even, necessarily, the termination of the relationship. It is the maintenance of your own trajectory, regardless of their response to it. Your expansion is not a provocation, it is simply who you are, becoming more fully yourself. Those who can grow alongside you will, those who cannot, will eventually reveal that incompatibility, and in doing so, they will give you the clarity you need to respond accordingly. 5. Taking your fate into your own hands and drawing your lines. Jung gave us one of the most penetrating observations in the history of psychology when he wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This single sentence contains, in compressed form, the essential insight that underlies everything we have been exploring today. The patterns that drain us, the relationships that diminish us, the dynamics that leave us feeling perpetually depleted or confused, or smaller than we know ourselves to be. These do not simply happen to us, they happen through us, through the unconscious beliefs we carry about what we deserve, about what we must do to be loved, about what it means to be a good person, about whether our needs are legitimate and our limits are permitted. The person who believes, at some unconscious level, that their worth must be earned through endless availability will attract, reliably and repeatedly, those who are looking for someone with endless availability to exploit. The person who has never fully internalized the right to occupy their own space will find themselves, again and again, in the company of those who are happy to occupy it for them, not because the universe is cruel, but because the unconscious patterns we carry send out signals in how we hold ourselves, in what we accept without comment, in the invisible negotiations of every interaction that are received and responded to by those around us. This is not blame, it is empowerment, because if these patterns arise from within us, they can be changed from within us. The work of making the unconscious conscious through reflection, through honest self-examination, through the willingness to look clearly at what we have been accepting that we should not have accepted, is the foundation of every other boundary we need to set. And from that foundation, the practical steps become clearer. Trust the signals your body sends you, even before your rational mind has confirmed them. Recognize when a relationship is structured primarily around the extraction of your energy, rather than its mutual exchange. Notice when someone responds to your limits with guilt rather than respect, and understand what that response reveals about their relationship to your autonomy. Pay attention to those who consistently respond to your growth with doubt rather than celebration, and give yourself, clearly and without apology, permission to move away from any presence that consistently pulls you away from your own center. Saying no is not selfishness. Protecting your energy is not cruelty. Withdrawing from relationships that consistently diminish you is not abandonment. These are acts of self-respect, and they are, Jung would insist, acts of genuine responsibility, because a person who has given away all of their energy, who has allowed their boundaries to be systematically dismantled, who has silenced their own intuition in favor of others' comfort, he is not in a position to give anything of real value to anyone. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. You cannot offer genuine presence from a place of depletion. You cannot love freely from a position of resentment. The protection of your inner life, your energy, your clarity, your sense of your own reality is not a luxury. It is the prerequisite for everything else you want to create, offer, and become. Jung spent his life in the conviction that the examined life, the life lived in honest, courageous relationship with one's own depths, is not merely more pleasant than the unexamined one. It is more real, more fully alive, more genuinely connected, paradoxically, to others, because genuine connection requires two people who are actually present, two people who have not lost themselves in the machinery of unconscious need and unconscious defense. The 5 dimensions we have explored today, the body's wisdom, the dynamics of energy depletion, the mechanisms of projection and gaslighting, the complex territory of envy, and the foundational work of conscious self-protection, are not separate problems requiring separate solutions. They are facets of a single challenge, the challenge of remaining yourself, clearly and with dignity, in the presence of forces both internal and external that would prefer you to be smaller, more manageable, more available, more doubtful of your own worth. You have the right to take up space. You have the right to trust your own perceptions. You have the right to grow without apologizing for the discomfort your growth creates in others. You have the right, as Jung insisted, to become who you actually are fully, without reservation, without the constant management of everyone else's reaction to your becoming. That right is not given to you by anyone else. It cannot be. It is claimed quietly, consistently, and with the kind of grounded courage that comes from having looked honestly at what you have been accepting and decided, once and for all, that you deserve better. Begin that claiming today. The unconscious is waiting to become conscious, and your life is waiting to become your own.